Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves transported back to Elizabethan England, the air thick with the smell of the River Thames and something vaguely resembling stale beer. Picture it, you're pushing your way through a boisterous crowd, a motley mix of finely dressed nobles and grubby commoners, all headed towards the Globe Theatre. The sun is beating down, the flags are flapping, and the anticipation is almost palpable. You're about to witness the magic of Shakespeare, but be warned, the groundlings, those standing in the open yard, are known for their enthusiastic participation, including a tendency to hurl rotten vegetables if they don't like the performance. Yeah, you probably won't survive this with clean clothes, let alone your dignity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the muddy yard, the air buzzing with chatter and the cries of hawkers selling pies and ale. The theatre itself is a sight to behold, a large, circular, open-air structure with a thatched roof only covering the stage and galleries. You notice the flag flying high above, indicating that a play will indeed be performed today. It's a red flag, which means a history play is on the bill, perhaps Henry V, or maybe Richard III. Historians still argue whether the color of the flag truly dictated the genre, but it's a widely accepted theory. You secure a spot amongst the groundlings, right near the front, a prime location, despite the risk of getting caught in any stray stage blood. Around you, the crowd is a cacophony of sounds. There's a gentleman in a velvet doublet loudly complaining about the price of oranges, a group of apprentices cracking jokes, and a woman with a rather impressive cough. This is no hushed concert hall, this is a vibrant, interactive experience. As you wait for the play to begin, you take a moment to observe the stage. It's surprisingly simple, a raised wooden platform with minimal scenery. There might be a painted backdrop or two to suggest a castle or a forest, but the focus is squarely on the actors and their words. This is a theater of imagination, where the audience fills in the blanks with their own minds. You can almost feel the energy crackling in the air, a potent mix of expectation and excitement. Suddenly, a trumpet blares, and the crowd roars its approval. The play is about to begin. An actor strides onto the stage, dressed in elaborate Elizabethan costume. He bows deeply, then launches into the opening lines of the play. His voice is strong and resonant, projecting to the back of the theater without the aid of microphones. The language is rich and poetic, filled with metaphors and allusions that would have been instantly recognizable to the audience of the time. You struggle to keep up at first, but soon you find yourself drawn into the story. The actors are skilled performers, using their voices and bodies to bring the characters to life. As the play progresses, you're struck by the sheer range of emotions on display. There's love and hate, jealousy and ambition, triumph and tragedy. Shakespeare, you realize, understood human nature in all its complexity. It's amazing how well these centuries-old words still resonate. During a particularly dramatic scene, one of the actors draws his sword and engages in a fierce duel. The crowd gasps and cheers, caught up in the thrill of the moment. You can almost feel the tension in the air as the two combatants clash, their swords ringing out in the afternoon sun. Of course, theatrical sword fights back then were far from realistic. They were more like choreographed dances, relying on skillful technique and precise timing. Woe betide the actor who miscalculated a move. It's also worth noting that the swords were usually blunt, though accidents did happen, and a real injury could put a bit of a damper on the performance, especially if it was the leading man who got stabbed. As the play reaches its climax, the atmosphere in the theater becomes electric. The actors are giving it their all, pouring their hearts and souls into their performances. You find yourself completely captivated, forgetting for a moment that you're standing in a muddy yard in the middle of London. The story unfolds with twists and turns, keeping you on the edge of your seat. You laugh at the witty banter, you weep at the tragic moments, and you cheer when the hero finally triumphs. It's a roller coaster of emotions, and you're enjoying every single moment. You might notice one thing a little odd, there aren't any women on stage. In Elizabethan England, female roles were played by young boys, usually just before their voices broke. It might seem strange to us now, but at the time it was perfectly accepted. And some of these boy actors became quite famous in their own right, playing some of the most iconic female characters in literature. Historians still argue about the precise reasons for this practice, citing everything from religious objections to social conventions. As the final scene draws to a close, you realize that the day has flown by. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows across the theater. The actors take their bows, and the crowd erupts in applause. You join in the cheering, feeling a sense of satisfaction and contentment. Leaving the theater, you're struck by the sheer scale of the entertainment industry in Elizabethan England. London was a hub of theatrical activity, with multiple theatres vying for the attention of the public. Shakespeare was just one of many playwrights working at the time, although he would, of course, go on to become the most famous. One curious detail you overhear as you leave is the story of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, Shakespeare's acting company, being required to obtain a license to perform. Without it, they would be shut down. It strikes you that even the bard himself wasn't immune to red tape. Walking back through the crowded streets, you can't help but reflect on the experience you've just had. You've traveled back in time to witness a performance of one of Shakespeare's plays, and it's been an unforgettable journey. You feel a sense of connection to the past, a sense of appreciation for the power of storytelling. But you probably also realize you smell like manure. As you continue your stroll through the London night, think back to your surroundings. You're in a time of huge change, especially in the arts. Theater wasn't just entertainment, it was a mirror reflecting society, its hopes, and its fears. And even after all this time, we are still peering into that same mirror. Fade to black, but no goodnight yet. Right then, settle in, grab your lukewarm cuppa, because let's be honest, it's probably gone cold already, hasn't it? And let's have a little chat about something near and dear to every resident of this charming, perpetually damp island, the unpredictable English weather. You step outside, blinking a little, maybe adjusting your sunglasses, a purchase made in optimistic defiance of all available meteorological evidence. Ah, sunshine. Glorious sunshine. You think, perhaps foolishly, that you'll finally get to wear that summer dress you bought back in, April. Confidence swells. You skip down the street, feeling almost, dare I say it, summery. And then, bam. A rogue gust of wind whips around the corner, stealing your hat and depositing a rogue leaf directly into your unsuspecting eye. The temperature plummets approximately 10 degrees. A dark cloud, the size and malevolence of a grumpy badger, rolls in from the horizon. You swear you can almost hear it muttering about bank holidays and picnics. This, my friend, is just a standard Tuesday in England. You trudge onwards, now contemplating the wisdom of your sartorial choices. A light drizzle begins, which, of course, quickly escalates into a full-blown downpour. You curse inwardly, remembering you left your umbrella at home. Typical. Everyone knows that owning an umbrella in England is a bit like owning a cat. You know you should have one, but you only remember its existence when it's far too late to be of any use. You duck into the nearest shop, shivering slightly. It's probably selling those tourist tat umbrellas covered in pictures of Big Ben and red telephone boxes. You consider buying one, but then remember that you already own approximately 7 umbrellas, each lost or broken in various stages of neglect. Plus, the rain will probably stop in 5 minutes anyway. You check your phone. The weather app, which you religiously consult every morning, predicts sunshine and a gentle breeze. Right. Well, it's certainly delivering on the breeze front, if you count the icy gale currently trying to dismantle your face. It's almost comedic, really, this constant meteorological tease. You've learned to dress in layers, like some kind of human onion, ready to peel off or pile on clothing at a moment's notice. You carry a raincoat in your bag, just in case. And you've developed a sixth sense, an almost psychic ability to predict when a sudden deluge is about to occur. It's a survival mechanism, really. Adapt or perish, as Darwin might have said if he'd ever tried to have a barbecue in August. And speaking of historical figures braving the elements, think about those poor Roman soldiers. They arrived in England in AD 43, all geared up for conquest, expecting sun-drenched beaches and readily surrendering locals. Instead, they got relentlessly grey skies, endless mud, and the distinct impression that everyone was perpetually unimpressed with them. They even built Hadrian's Wall to keep the wild, rainy north out. Historians still argue whether it was as much about keeping the Scots out as escaping the unrelenting weather. Imagine slogging through the Roman equivalent of gumboots, trying to conquer a land that seemed determined to drown you in despair. Must have put a damper on the whole empire-building vibe. But why is the weather in England so unpredictable? Well, geographically, you're positioned at the meeting point of several different air masses. You've got the warm, moist air coming in from the Atlantic, colliding with the cold, dry air from the Arctic. It's a recipe for meteorological mayhem. And then there's the jet stream, that high-altitude river of air that can shift and meander, bringing with it storms or periods of settled weather. It's like nature's mood ring, constantly changing and reflecting its inner turmoil. And don't even get you started on the microclimates. You can drive 10 miles and experience 3 different weather systems. 1 minute, you're basking in sunshine, the next, you're driving through a pea-soup fog. It's like the weather is deliberately trying to keep you on your toes. Now, for a little bit of curious trivia, did you know that the Great Storm of 1987, which famously caught weather forecasters completely by surprise, was so severe that it uprooted millions of trees and even blew a few people into the sea? Michael Fish, the weatherman who famously declared there wouldn't be a hurricane, became a national laughingstock, a reminder that even the most sophisticated weather models are sometimes no match for the sheer capriciousness of the British climate. You also remember that for a while, it seemed that all the squirrels disappeared. Apparently, they'd gone underground to avoid the storm and were too scared to come out afterwards. And some say the ghost of Michael Fish still roams the Met Office, muttering apologies and checking the barometric pressure. You've probably heard people say, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. While that might be true to some extent, it doesn't really make you feel any better when you're caught in a torrential downpour wearing sandals and a t-shirt. It's more like, there's no such thing as appropriate clothing, only varying degrees of discomfort. You persevere, battling the elements, until, finally, a sliver of sunlight breaks through the clouds. A rainbow appears, arching across the sky. It's breathtakingly beautiful, a fleeting moment of perfect serenity. You snap a picture for Instagram, adding a caption about the resilience of the human spirit or some other equally profound sentiment. But deep down, you know it's a trap. The rainbow is just a cunning ploy, a brief respite before the next onslaught. You can feel it in your bones. The weather in England is a master of deception, a fickle lover who showers you with affection 1 minute and then leaves you out in the cold the next. You're probably familiar with the term heatwave in other countries. Here, in England, a heatwave is basically 3 days in a row where the temperature exceeds 25 degrees Celsius. The entire country grinds to a halt. People flock to the beaches, armed with Factor 50 sunscreen and a vague sense of panic. The newspapers run headlines about killer heat and dangerously high temperatures. And then, after 3 days, it's back to normal, gray skies, drizzle, and the faint scent of damp dog. And let's not forget the endless discussions about the weather. It's a national pastime, a conversation starter, a source of endless fascination and frustration. You can strike up a conversation with a complete stranger simply by mentioning the weather. Lovely day, isn't it? Or, terrible weather we're having, are guaranteed to elicit a response. It's a social lubricant, a way of connecting with others in a land where making direct eye contact is considered a form of aggression. But that's the thing about the English weather, you learn to live with it. You adapt. You become resilient. You develop a dark sense of humor. You learn to appreciate the small moments of sunshine, the brief glimpses of blue sky. You even start to find a certain beauty in the gray, the rain, the mist. After all, it's part of what makes England, well, England. You wouldn't have it any other way. Except, maybe, just a little bit drier. There's even some historical debate about how much the weather has changed over the centuries. Some scholars point to evidence of a medieval warm period, where temperatures were significantly warmer than they are now, allowing vineyards to flourish in regions where they can no longer survive. Others argue that the fluctuations are just part of a natural cycle, and that the current changes are not necessarily unprecedented. One thing's for sure, those medieval wine growers must have been pretty annoyed when the mini ice age hit. And on a fringe note, you might occasionally stumble across someone who believes that the weather is controlled by the government, using secret technology to manipulate the clouds and create rain for nefarious purposes. They'll tell you about chemtrails, and cloud seeding, and other conspiracy theories that sound vaguely plausible until you realize that the government can't even manage to fix the potholes on the roads, let alone control the weather. So, as you sit there, listening to the gentle patter of rain against the window, because, let's be honest, it's probably raining again, isn't it? Take a moment to appreciate the unique charm of the English weather. It's unpredictable, frustrating, and often downright miserable. But it's also part of what makes this country so special. It's a constant reminder that life is full of surprises, both good and bad. And that sometimes, the best thing you can do is just grab your umbrella, put on your wellies, and embrace the chaos. Oh, and maybe invest in a good dehumidifier. You know, just in case. Alright, settle in, grab your metaphorical blankie, because we're about to time travel, and possibly get rained on. You trudge through the mud, past the hawkers yelling about their wares, mostly questionable meat pies and even more questionable hygiene, and toward a rather impressive circular structure. This is it. The globe. The globe. And it's, well, open air. Imagine, if you will, a giant donut, but instead of sprinkles, it's thatched roof and boisterous crowds. You push your way through the throng, a mix of finely dressed nobles and, decidedly less finely dressed commoners. You try not to make eye contact with anyone who looks like they haven't bathed since Queen Elizabeth's coronation. And trust me, there are a lot of those. The air crackles with anticipation. You find a spot as a groundling, also charmingly known as a penny stinkards. You pay your single penny, and now you're crammed in with everyone else, breathing in the collective essence of the Elizabethan working class. Try to ignore the persistent coughs and the occasional waft of something that smells suspiciously like wet dog. Looking up, you see the massive wooden frame of the globe soaring above. This wasn't exactly your modern, state-of-the-art theater with plush seating and surround sound, you know. It was a testament to ingenuity and resourcefulness. But more importantly, it was cheap. The original globe was built in 1599, using timbers from the theater, an earlier playhouse that had been dismantled because of a land dispute. Talk about upcycling, eh? The stage juts out into the yard, practically inviting the actors to connect with the audience. Which is great, unless they have halitosis. Then it's slightly less great. Above the stage, a thatched roof, known as the heavens, protected the players from the sun and, hopefully, some of the rain. Key word, some. Because let's be honest, this is England. Rain is practically a national sport. And the globe was, not exactly waterproof. The thatched roof offered some protection, but the yard itself? A free-for-all of mud and puddles when the heavens opened. You can just picture it, can't you? Romeo declaring his undying love for Juliet while simultaneously dodging raindrops the size of grapes. Talk about a mood killer. And speaking of the roof, it wasn't just there for show, or even to just keep the rain off some heads. It had a crucial role in special effects. Trapdoors allowed for dramatic entrances and exits, and the heavens could be used to lower actors playing gods or angels onto the stage. It was all very theatrical. Although, one wonders how they managed to pull that off without someone getting a face full of pigeon droppings. Think about the sound, too. No fancy acoustics here. The globe relied entirely on the actors' voices, the natural reverberation of the wooden structure, and the, let's call it, enthusiastic participation of the audience. A good roar of laughter, a collective gasp of horror, a well-timed boo, it all added to the atmosphere. The audience was a character itself. They weren't passive observers, they were active participants. They shouted, cheered, threw things, hopefully not rotten vegetables, but you never know, and generally made their opinions known. Imagine trying to perform Hamlet with a bunch of drunken groundlings heckling you. Good luck with that, Shakespeare. Of course, the lack of a roof also meant that performances were entirely dependent on the weather. If it rained too hard, the show was cancelled. Simple as that. You imagine some poor actor, dressed as a king, trying to deliver a dramatic monologue while simultaneously being drenched to the bone. To be or not to be, cough, splutter, that is the achoo question. And speaking of cancellations, sometimes the globe would get shut down for other reasons entirely. Plague outbreaks were common in London, and if the authorities thought that large gatherings were contributing to the spread of the disease, they would close the theaters. Imagine buying a ticket, trekking all the way to the globe, and then finding a sign on the door saying, "Sorry, no Shakespeare today. Go home and self-isolate." Talk about disappointing. Historians still argue whether the globe was truly round or actually had more sides. Contemporary illustrations seem to suggest a round shape, but archaeological evidence is less conclusive. Did Shakespeare and his company intentionally build a circular theater, or was it just a happy accident of design? The world may never know. One quirky tidbit: the globe actually burned down in 1613 during a performance of Henry VIII. A cannon fired during the show ignited the thatched roof, and the whole place went up in flames. Ironic, isn't it? All that worry about rain, and it's fire that does the deed. But it was rebuilt, of course. Because you can't keep a good theater down. Especially when there's money to be made. You begin to notice how little privacy there was, truly. The actors had to change and prepare in cramped backstage areas, probably filled with costumes that smelled faintly of mothballs and stale sweat. Imagine trying to concentrate on your lines while your co-star is belching loudly next to you and another one is complaining about their itchy tights. The glamour. Now, a mainstream historical fact for you: Shakespeare wasn't just a playwright, he was also a shareholder in the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the acting company that owned the globe. So, every successful play meant more money in his pocket. He was essentially a Renaissance-era mogul. Another fringe tidbit to tickle your brain: there's a theory that the globe's design was influenced by Roman amphitheaters. While there's no definitive proof, it's certainly possible that Shakespeare and his contemporaries were inspired by the classical world. After all, they were all educated in Latin and knew their Roman history. So, maybe the globe was a subtle homage to the Colosseum, just with fewer gladiators and more iambic pentameter. You squint, and the sun peeks out from behind the clouds, momentarily blinding you. It's then you notice the detail of the wooden framework, which, if you think about it, resembles the framework of a ship. Considering England's deep roots in maritime activity, maybe the globe was actually a metaphor for England itself, a ship sailing on the seas of history, weathering storms and navigating treacherous waters. Or maybe it was just made of wood that happened to be shaped like that. Who knows? But as the first actor strides onto the stage, you are transported. You feel the energy of the crowd, you are swept up in the passion of the players, you are transported. You almost forgot about the mud and the questionable smells. Almost. You trudge through the muddy streets, the rain plastering your hair to your forehead like a second, unwelcome scalp. It's coming down in sheets, a veritable aquatic curtain drawn across the world. You can practically taste the dampness, that metallic tang that clings to the air after a proper deluge. The cobblestones are slick beneath your worn leather boots, each step a careful negotiation with gravity. You're on your way to the Globe Theatre, or what's left of it, a reconstruction that smells more of fresh lumber than Elizabethan history. Tonight, you're supposed to be watching Hamlet. Or, rather, attempting to watch Hamlet. Because, well, look around. The sky is weeping harder than Ophelia on, like, her worst day. You wonder if even the most dedicated groundlings, those hardy souls who'd pay a penny to stand and watch a play, rain or shine, would bother turning up for this. Maybe they're all at home, huddled around a roaring fire, playing a spirited game of Gleek. It was a popular card game back then, in case you were wondering. Think of it as a Tudor-era version of poker, but with far less bluffing and considerably more confusing rules. You reach the theater, a sprawling, circular structure that looms against the gray sky. The thatch roof, usually a charming detail, now looks less quaint English village and more potential mold incubator. You see a few figures milling about under the meager shelter offered by the eaves, their faces a mixture of hope and despair. Are they actors? Stagehands? Just really dedicated drama enthusiasts? You can't tell. Maybe they're all three. It's a bit like waiting for a bus that's indefinitely delayed, except instead of a bus, it's the entertainment of a troupe of players, and instead of being late, it's actively being sabotaged by the heavens. You consider your options. You could turn back, seek refuge in a nearby tavern, and drown your sorrows in ale, a time-honored tradition, really. Or you could brave the elements and see if the show will, against all odds, go on. After all, you bought a ticket. And by ticket, I mean you probably slipped a coin to someone at the gate. The Globe, as you might recall from history class, or maybe a hazy recollection of a documentary you half-watched while scrolling through Instagram, was famously built by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the acting troupe that Shakespeare himself was a part of. They needed a place to perform after a lease dispute at their previous venue. So, they literally took the timbers from the theatre, another playing house, and rebuilt it on the south bank of the Thames. Talk about a DIY project. It's basically the ultimate upcycle. Now, the quirky tidbit for this scene: did you know that the original Globe Theatre burned down in 1613? That's right, during a performance of Henry VIII. A cannon fired during the play, for dramatic effect, naturally, set the thatched roof alight. And even better, the only reported injury was a man whose breeches caught fire. He was quickly doused with ale. I guess that's one way to put out a fire. And get really, really sticky. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare himself was actually present during the fire. Some say he was at his country home in Stratford-upon-Avon, while others claim he was in the audience, watching his work go up in flames. Imagine being the playwright responsible for a play so exciting it literally burns the house down. Talk about a memorable premiere. The rain continues to fall, and the actors huddled under the eaves look increasingly miserable. You see one of them, a young man with a lute slung across his back, trying to tune the instrument, his fingers fumbling with the strings. The sound is muffled and discordant, a sad counterpoint to the rhythmic drumming of the rain. You imagine how frustrating it must be to pour your heart and soul into memorizing lines, rehearsing scenes, perfecting your performance, only to have it all washed away by a downpour. You remember reading something about the challenges actors faced in Elizabethan England. It wasn't exactly a glamorous profession. They were often viewed with suspicion, lumped in with vagrants and rogues. They relied on the patronage of wealthy nobles for support, and even then, their livelihoods were precarious. One bad review, one unpopular play, and they could find themselves out of work, forced to rely on the kindness of strangers, or, more likely, the generosity of tavern owners. And then there's the weather. You think to yourself, did they have weather insurance back then? Probably not. The show had to go on, rain or shine, plague or no plague, and there was plenty of plague. You can't just call off a performance because the skies decided to open up and cry. Audiences expected a show, and actors, well, they needed to eat. That's the crux of this whole dilemma, isn't it? The age-old question, to perform or not to perform. The young man with the lute sighs, gives up on tuning his instrument, and leans against one of the wooden pillars supporting the roof. He looks utterly dejected. You wonder what's going through his mind. Is he thinking about his rent? His next meal? The crushing weight of expectation? Or maybe he's just really, really cold and wet. You overhear snatches of conversation. Think they'll call it off, asks a woman in a sodden velvet gown. Doubtful, replies a man with a drooping mustache. They need the money. Besides, Will wouldn't want to disappoint the, oh, who are we kidding, one person who's shown up tonight. You imagine Will is the director, or maybe Shakespeare himself, if he miraculously decided to show up despite the weather. Or maybe Will is just a particularly stubborn stagehand with a penchant for dramatic pronouncements. Here's the quirky tidbit: Shakespeare wasn't just a playwright, he was also a shrewd businessman. He owned a share in the Globe Theatre, which meant he profited directly from its success. So, while he might have been a tortured artist, he was also a capitalist pig. Just kidding, mostly. But it does add another layer to the whole, to perform or not to perform, debate. For Shakespeare, it wasn't just about artistic integrity, it was also about the bottom line. He probably wasn't out there with a squeegee, but I bet he had opinions about the box office. And speaking of the bottom line, mainstream history tells us that Shakespeare became quite wealthy from his theatrical ventures. He invested in property, lent money, and generally lived a comfortable life. He was a far cry from the starving artist stereotype. So while he might have penned some of the most profound lines in the English language, he also knew how to make a buck. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare was actually the sole author of all the plays attributed to him. Some believe he collaborated with other writers, while others suggest that some of the works were entirely written by someone else and attributed to him for marketing purposes. It's a literary conspiracy theory that has persisted for centuries. It's like the Beyoncé, who wrote Single Ladies, debate but with ruffled collars and iambic pentameter. Back at the Globe, the rain starts to ease up, just a little. A glimmer of hope pierces the gloom. The actors seem to perk up slightly. The young man with the lute tentatively plucks a string. Maybe, just maybe, the show will go on after all. You shiver, partly from the cold, partly from anticipation. You really hope this thing doesn't end with another building in flames. You remember reading that actors in Shakespeare's time had to be incredibly versatile. They had to be able to sing, dance, fence, and deliver complex lines with clarity and passion. They had to be masters of disguise, able to transform themselves into kings, queens, villains, and fools with equal ease. They were the ultimate chameleons, adapting to whatever role was demanded of them. It's like the ultimate acting challenge: can you convince a handful of damp, miserable spectators that you are, in fact, a tragic Danish prince contemplating mortality, all while battling the elements and trying not to slip on the wet stage? It takes a certain kind of dedication, or perhaps just desperation, to pull that off. You think they deserve some kind of special award, like an honorary Golden Globe, but you're pretty sure those didn't exist back then. The rain has almost stopped now. A few patches of blue sky peek through the clouds. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the small crowd. You see a figure emerge from the bowels of the theater, a man with a booming voice and a determined expression. He raises his arms, signaling for attention. Friends, Romans, countrymen, he bellows, wrong play, but who's counting? Despite the inclement weather, we have decided that the show must go on. Gather round, good people, and prepare to be entertained. And if anyone gets struck by lightning, well, that's just good theatrics. Okay, maybe he didn't actually say the lightning part, but you can imagine he was thinking it. You can't help but smile. These actors, these brave, slightly insane souls, are going to do it. They're going to perform Hamlet in the face of adversity, because that's what actors do. They bring stories to life, they transport you to other worlds, they make you laugh, they make you cry, and they do it all while wearing ridiculously uncomfortable costumes and trying not to trip over their own feet. And you're going to watch them. You're going to stand in the mud and the lingering drizzle and witness the magic of theater unfold, because that's what you do. You appreciate the dedication, the artistry, the sheer stubbornness of these performers. You came here for a show, and by Jove, you're going to get one. Plus, you really want to see how they handle the graveyard scene with all this extra mud. It's bound to be earthy. Sorry, I had to. Alright, settle in, grab your metaphorical blanket, and let's keep meandering through the fascinating world of rainy stage performances. You're probably wondering, or maybe you aren't, but either way, we're going to explore what it felt like to be in the audience during these downpours. Imagine yourself perched on a wooden bench, the air thick with anticipation. The smell of damp earth and wet wool hangs heavy. The play's already started, maybe it's Shakespeare, maybe it's something less immortal, but suddenly, the heavens open. A deluge. The kind where individual raindrops become blurry streaks and the canvas covering the stage starts to sag precariously. What do? Do you scramble for cover, a collective groan rising from the crowd as meticulously coiffed wigs begin to droop? Do you brave it out, stubbornly clinging to your hard-won seat, determined to witness the tragic demise of Hamlet, even if you might be succumbing to pneumonia first? Or do you, perhaps, find a strange, perverse pleasure in the chaos of it all? Well, the answer, unsurprisingly, is probably a mix of everything. Because human nature is wonderfully, maddeningly complex. It's not like there was a perfectly synchronized stampede toward the nearest pub whenever it started raining. Different folks reacted differently, then as now. Some were pragmatists, some were theater devotees, and some, bless their hearts, were just plain weird. Think about it, back then, getting wet wasn't quite the same as it is today. You didn't have Gore-Tex jackets or water-resistant mascara. If you got drenched, you stayed drenched. You trudged home, squelching in your sodden shoes, praying you wouldn't catch a chill that could, actually kill you. Medical care, let's just say, wasn't exactly cutting edge. A cough could be a death sentence. The invention of penicillin was still centuries away, and a lot of what they called medicine involved leeches, dubious herbal concoctions, and a whole lot of wishful thinking. So, braving the rain was a bigger gamble than it is now. Unless, of course, you're caught in a torrential downpour at a music festival wearing only a glittery crop top. Then, yeah, maybe it's about the same level of misery. And yet, people did stay. They endured. Why? Well, for one thing, theater was a major form of entertainment. No Netflix, no TikTok, no endlessly scrolling through Instagram photos of impeccably plated avocado toast. Entertainment options were limited. Going to the theater was an event. And even a soggy Shakespearean tragedy beat another night of listening to your neighbor's banjo practice. Speaking of Shakespeare, Queen Elizabeth I was a massive fan of the theater, which definitely helped its popularity. She saw the theater as a place to promote the virtues of monarchy and the importance of loyalty to the crown. Plus, she probably enjoyed a good play. One can imagine her in the royal box, perhaps shielded from the worst of the weather, but still, experiencing the elements alongside her subjects. Or maybe she just secretly liked watching the groundlings squirm. Beyond mere entertainment, there was also a sense of collective experience. You were sharing something with everyone else in the audience. A shared discomfort, perhaps, but also a shared appreciation for the performance, for the sheer audacity of the actors who refused to let a little rain, or even a lot of rain, stop the show. And sometimes, the rain itself became part of the performance. An unplanned, unpredictable element that could add a whole new layer of meaning to the play. Imagine watching King Lear raging against the storm, the real rain mirroring his internal turmoil. It must have been breathtakingly powerful. Of course, it could also have been unintentionally hilarious if Lear's cardboard crown started to disintegrate, but let's focus on the dramatic possibilities. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare and his contemporaries intentionally incorporated the possibility of rain into their staging. Some believe the plays were designed to be adaptable, capable of being performed in any weather. Others think they just winged it and hoped for the best. Personally, I'm leaning towards the latter. I have this mental image of Shakespeare backstage, frantically improvising lines about the rain while simultaneously trying to keep his doublet from shrinking. Interestingly, there's also the question of how audiences perceived the rain. Our modern sensibilities, conditioned by climate control and the constant pursuit of comfort, might lead us to view rain as an inconvenience, an annoyance to be avoided at all costs. But for people in the past, rain was a more integral part of life. It was essential for crops, for clean water, for survival. So, perhaps they were more accepting of it, more willing to embrace its presence, even in the middle of a play. Maybe they even found it refreshing. Or maybe they were just too polite to complain. Remember, these were people who lived in a world governed by strict social codes. Public displays of displeasure were frowned upon. So, even if they were secretly miserable, they were probably more inclined to grin and bear it, to maintain a facade of stoic enjoyment. Oh yes, the rain is lovely. Add such character to Ophelia's drowning scene. There's even some evidence to suggest that certain audience members actually enjoyed the rain. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of weird, theatrical-themed kink here, though, who am I to judge? I'm talking about a more primal connection to nature, a sense of exhilaration that comes from being exposed to the elements. Think of it like this: you're sitting in the dark, surrounded by strangers, watching a story unfold. Suddenly, the world outside bursts in, uninvited, uncontrollable. It's a reminder of the raw power of nature, of our own vulnerability, of the fact that we are, after all, just tiny specks on a giant, wet planet. And that, in its own strange way, can be liberating. Quirky tidbit time. Did you know that in some parts of Europe, it was considered good luck to get rained on during a performance? The belief was that the rain would wash away bad vibes and bring good fortune to the actors and the audience alike. Imagine trying to convince a Broadway producer of that today. But sir, a little rain will enhance ticket sales. Trust me. Ultimately, understanding audience reactions to rainy performances requires a bit of imagination, a willingness to step outside our own modern perspectives and try to see the world through the eyes of those who came before us. It requires us to acknowledge that discomfort and pleasure, resilience and resignation, can coexist in the same space, in the same moment. And it requires us to remember that even in the midst of a downpour, there's always the possibility of finding something beautiful, something meaningful, something entertaining. And now, as the metaphorical rain starts to clear, and you find yourself, hopefully, dry and comfortable, let's pause for a moment. Consider the enduring power of live performance, the ability of theater to transcend the elements and connect us to something larger than ourselves. Even when the weather tries its best to ruin the show, the shared experience, the collective energy, can still create something truly magical. Also, don't forget to check your pockets for forgotten candies. Theater snacks are a blessing, rain or shine. Right, settle in, settle in. Let's talk fabric. Specifically, really fancy fabric and the very real threat posed to it by, well, the sky doing its thing. Think Elizabethan England. Picture it, ruffs the size of satellite dishes, velvet so plush you could sleep on it, and maybe some people did, strategically, and layers upon layers of silk, brocade, and possibly even gold thread. Now picture a sudden downpour. You trudge down the muddy lane towards the Globe Theatre, a persistent drizzle already clinging to your, admittedly less impressive, wool cloak. The air smells like wet dog and slightly rotting vegetables, a heady mix that somehow manages to be both unpleasant and strangely comforting. You're here for a matinee performance of Hamlet. Or, you were here for Hamlet. The rain is making you question your life choices. You see actors milling about near the entrance, looking distinctly less regal than you'd imagine, mostly because they're huddled under anything that even vaguely resembles shelter. One of them, clearly playing a nobleman, is attempting to shield his elaborate, jewel-encrusted doublet with a rather pathetic-looking piece of canvas. Good luck with that, mate. The problem, you see, isn't just about getting a bit damp. It's about the sheer, unadulterated disaster that rain can inflict on these costumes. Elizabethan costumes were more than just clothes, they were status symbols, walking works of art, and serious investments. Imagine the modern equivalent: couture gowns, bespoke suits, outfits so expensive they have their own security detail. Now imagine chucking those into a washing machine filled with mud. That's essentially what rain does to delicate historical textiles. The colors alone. We're not talking about modern, color-fast dyes here. Elizabethan dyes were often derived from plants, insects, and minerals, all of which were liable to run, fade, or react unpredictably when exposed to water. Purple, for instance, was notoriously difficult and expensive to produce, often extracted from sea snails. Imagine the horror of watching your royal purple robes slowly morph into a blotchy, brownish-gray mess as the rain trickles down. Not exactly the image of power and authority you were going for, is it? And then there's the structure. These weren't clothes designed for comfort or practicality. They were designed to make a statement. Think stiff bodices reinforced with whalebone, yes, actual whalebone, padded sleeves that added serious bulk, and farthingales, those enormous, cone-shaped skirts that made walking through doorways a competitive sport. All this structure relied on meticulous construction and specific materials. Rain could weaken seams, warp the whalebone, and generally wreak havoc on the carefully engineered shape of the garment. The starch in the ruffs would collapse, leaving you looking like a deflated dandelion. No one wants that. Mainstream historical fact time: Queen Elizabeth I was notoriously obsessed with her wardrobe, and her clothing was heavily regulated to reflect social hierarchy. Think of it as the ultimate dress code, enforced by law. It was important. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some people believe that certain colors had magical properties. Red, for example, was thought to ward off evil spirits. So, if you were wearing a bright red costume and got caught in the rain, you weren't just worried about the color running, you were worried about your magical protection washing away. Priorities. Historians still argue whether the Elizabethan theatre really did close down frequently because of rain. Common sense suggests yes, but documentation is often scant and prone to interpretation. We do know that performances were often held in the afternoon, partly to take advantage of natural light, electricity was still a glint in a scientist's eye, and partly because, well, people had other things to do in the evenings, like churning butter or avoiding plague. The actors themselves probably weren't thrilled with the rain, either. Besides the obvious discomfort of performing in wet, heavy costumes, there was the very real risk of damage to their livelihood. Actors relied on their costumes to create characters and convey status. A damaged costume could mean a less convincing performance, which could mean fewer paying customers, which could mean, well, less food on the table. Not ideal. Think about the Globe itself. It was, famously, an open-air theater. No roof. So, if it rained on everyone. The groundlings, those unfortunate souls who paid a penny to stand in the pit, were particularly exposed. They were basically living human sponges, soaking up the rain and mud while trying to follow the plot. You can imagine the olfactory delights of a few hundred wet, unwashed bodies packed together like sardines. And you thought your commute was bad. The more well-to-do patrons, who could afford to sit in the covered galleries, were slightly better off, but not immune. Rain could still blow in, and the general atmosphere would be damp and unpleasant. Plus, the noise of the rain drumming on the wooden structure could make it difficult to hear the actors. So, even if you were rich enough to avoid getting completely soaked, you still weren't exactly enjoying a premium theatrical experience. But back to the costumes. Let's say, hypothetically, that you're the wardrobe mistress, or master, equality, for a major theatrical company. You're responsible for the upkeep and protection of hundreds of expensive and delicate costumes. The pressure is on. What do you do when the heavens open? Well, first of all, you panic. Just a little. Then, you probably try to get the actors under cover as quickly as possible. This might involve herding them into the tiring house, the actor's dressing room, which, let's be honest, was probably already a cramped and chaotic space. Imagine trying to maneuver a farthingale through a narrow doorway while simultaneously yelling at people to be careful of the velvet. Stressful, to say the least. Once everyone is, relatively, safe, you might try to cover the costumes with whatever you can find, spare pieces of fabric, old cloaks, even blankets. The goal is to create a barrier between the rain and the delicate materials. But, of course, this is a temporary solution. You can't just leave the costumes piled up under a damp blanket for hours. That would be a recipe for mildew, mold, and general textile disaster. So, what happens next? Well, this is where things get tricky. Elizabethan cleaning methods were, let's just say, not as sophisticated as what we have today. Dry cleaning hadn't been invented yet, and throwing everything into a washing machine with some Tide Pods was definitely not an option. Instead, costumes were typically cleaned by hand, using a variety of methods. One common technique involved brushing the fabric with a stiff brush to remove dirt and dust. This could be effective for surface grime, but it wouldn't do much for deep-seated stains or water damage. Another method involved using a damp cloth to gently blot the fabric. This could help to remove some stains, but it also risked spreading the damage or causing the colors to run. And then there were the more creative cleaning solutions. Some people swore by using stale bread to absorb stains. Others recommended applying a paste made from vinegar and salt. And still others believed that the best way to clean a velvet costume was to hang it in a smoky room. The smoke was supposed to draw out the dirt and moisture. Whether it actually worked is another question. That sounds like a particularly bad idea if you ask me. Quirky tidbit number 2, perfumes were often used to mask unpleasant odors in clothing, rather than to actually clean them. So, if your costume smelled strongly of lavender or rose, it might not be because it was fresh and clean. It might be because someone was trying to cover up the lingering scent of mud, sweat, and desperation. Mainstream historical fact, soap was a luxury item in Elizabethan England, and not commonly used for laundry. So, the idea of giving your costumes a thorough soapy wash was pretty much out of the question. Even if you could afford soap, it was often harsh and alkaline, which could damage delicate fabrics. The drying process was also fraught with peril. Hanging wet costumes in direct sunlight could cause the colors to fade. Leaving them in a damp room could lead to mold and mildew. The ideal solution was to dry them in a well-ventilated space, away from direct sunlight and heat. But finding such a space in a crowded and chaotic theater was often easier said than done. Historians still argue whether professional cleaners or dyers were a common part of the Elizabethan theatrical world. Records are sparse, and it's difficult to know for sure how much of the cleaning and repair work was done in-house versus outsourced to specialists. My guess? It was a bit of both, depending on the theater's resources and the severity of the damage. Ultimately, protecting Elizabethan costumes from the rain was a constant battle. It required a combination of vigilance, ingenuity, and a healthy dose of good luck. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, the rain would win. A costume would be ruined, a performance would be cancelled, and everyone would be left feeling damp, miserable, and slightly defeated. But that was just part of life in Elizabethan England. And it's something to remember next time you complain about a little drizzle ruining your plans. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's delve into the captivating world of theatrical improvisation and adaptation, that thrilling tightrope walk between sticking to the script and letting the moment take over. Just breathe. It's all gonna be alright. Picture yourself stepping onto a stage, bathed in the expectant glow of the spotlights. You've rehearsed your lines, you think you know you're blocking, but that unsettling little voice in the back of your head whispers, what if? What if a prop breaks? What if your fellow actor forgets their line? What if a rogue pigeon flies onto the stage during Hamlet's soliloquy? Okay, maybe that last one's a little far-fetched, but the point is, the theater is a live beast, unpredictable and demanding constant vigilance. You have to be ready to roll with it, to improvise, to adapt, to not completely freak out and run screaming. Improvisation isn't just about making things up on the spot, it's a highly skilled craft, built on years of training and a deep understanding of character, plot, and audience expectation. Think of it as jazz, but with more tights and less saxophone. You've got the basic structure, the melody, but you're allowed, encouraged, even, to riff, to explore, to find new nuances within the framework. Consider the Commedia dell'arte, a vibrant form of Italian theater that flourished from the 16th to the 18th centuries. These weren't your stuffy, rigidly scripted affairs. Instead, they relied heavily on stock characters, the pompous Pantalone, the boastful Capitano, the cunning servant Arlecchino, and Lazzi, pre-planned comedic bits, which the actors then wove into a loosely defined scenario. So, they knew the general direction of the play, but the specific jokes, the physical comedy, the witty repartee, that was all improvised, tailored to the specific audience and the energy of the moment. Can you imagine? No two performances were ever truly alike. I bet they had stage fright on speed dial. Now, let's jump forward a few centuries. You're at the Globe Theatre in London, circa 1601. Shakespeare's Hamlet is playing. A packed house, groundlings jostling for position, the air thick with anticipation, and probably the scent of unwashed bodies, let's be honest. What if, mid-dash, to be or not to be, a particularly vocal audience member starts heckling? Or if the actor playing the ghost forgets a key line about his untimely demise at the hands of his brother? You can't just stop the play, can you? The show must go on. And it did. Actors in Shakespeare's time were masters of adaptation. They were used to performing in all kinds of conditions, noisy crowds, unpredictable weather, and the occasional rotten tomato thrown at the stage, hopefully not during a particularly moving scene. They would have been skilled at picking up cues, subtly prompting each other, and even improvising new lines to cover up mistakes or engage with the audience. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare himself encouraged improvisation, with some claiming that his plays were merely blueprints, intended to be fleshed out by the actor's own creativity. Others insist on strict adherence to the text, dismissing any deviations as mere incompetence. But regardless of Shakespeare's own intentions, the sheer demands of live performance in a rowdy Elizabethan theatre would have necessitated a certain degree of flexibility. They couldn't just pause and Google the answer if they flubbed a line, they had to think on their feet. There's even a legend, likely apocryphal but too good to ignore, about a performance of Richard III at the Globe where the actor playing Richard forgot his lines and, in a moment of pure panic, ad-libbed a completely nonsensical speech about the king's love for sausages. The audience, initially confused, apparently erupted in laughter, and the actor managed to recover and get back to the script, forever cementing the legend of the Sausage King. Look, I told you I'd give you light jokes. It's a tough world out there. Adaptation also extended beyond simple line flubs. Consider the actor who had to play Juliet but had a terrible cold and his voice was shot. Now, in modern theater, you could call in an understudy to perform the role. But, back then, plays were made to go on, and there was a tight performance schedule. The actor may have to use his gestures and body language to compensate for his voice. Let's move on, shall we? Picture yourself as a stage manager for a small, avant-garde theater company in the 1960s. Your troupe is attempting a radical adaptation of Ibsen's A Doll's House, but with a decidedly feminist, absurdist twist. The set is minimalist, the costumes are bizarre, think Nora in a spacesuit, and the dialogue is a mix of Ibsen's original text and stream-of-consciousness monologues about the patriarchy. Good luck finding that on Broadway. One night, during a particularly intense scene, the actress playing Nora, overcome with emotion, or perhaps just a touch of method acting gone awry, throws a plate of spaghetti at the actor playing Torvald. Completely unplanned, utterly unexpected. What do? Well, you certainly don't stop the play. You can't just yell, cut, and start over. Instead, the other actors have to react, to incorporate this unexpected act of pasta-based aggression into the scene. Perhaps Torvald wipes the spaghetti from his face with a look of bewildered indignation, or perhaps he launches into a furious tirade about the cost of groceries. The possibilities are endless. The important thing is to stay in character, to maintain the momentum of the play, and to make the moment feel organic and authentic. It might even turn out to be the most memorable part of the performance. Now, a quirky tidbit for you. there's a persistent rumor that Orson Welles, during his infamous radio adaptation of War of the Worlds in 1938, intentionally added elements of improvisation to heighten the sense of realism and panic. Whether this is true or not is debatable, but it certainly adds to the legend of that broadcast, which famously convinced many listeners that Martians were actually invading New Jersey. It's also the reason I take any news report about little green men with a grain of salt the size of the Empire State Building. The point is, adaptation in theater isn't just about dealing with accidents or mistakes. It's also about taking risks, embracing the unexpected, and finding new ways to connect with the audience. It's about being present in the moment and trusting your instincts. But how do actors learn to be so quick on their feet? How do they develop the skills necessary to improvise effectively? Well, there are countless training exercises designed to hone these abilities. One common technique is called yes and, where actors are encouraged to accept whatever their scene partner offers and build upon it. For example, if one actor says, "Look, a flying pig," the other actor can't respond with, "No, it's not, you're crazy." Instead, they have to say something like, "Yes, and it's wearing a tiny top hat." This fosters a sense of collaboration and encourages actors to think creatively and spontaneously. It also might lead to some seriously weird performances. Another popular exercise involves improvising scenes based on audience suggestions. This forces actors to think on their feet and come up with characters, plots, and dialogue on the spot. It's a great way to develop confidence and learn to trust your own instincts. Beyond specific exercises, however, the most important thing is to simply practice, practice, practice. The more you improvise, the more comfortable you become with the unpredictable nature of live performance. It's like learning a musical instrument. You wouldn't expect to play a concerto perfectly the first time you pick up a violin, would you? Improvisation is the same way. It takes time, dedication, and a willingness to make mistakes. But the rewards are well worth the effort. Ultimately, improvisation and adaptation are essential skills for any actor. They allow you to connect with the audience in a deeper, more meaningful way, to bring your own unique perspective to the material, and to transform even the most challenging situations into opportunities for creative expression. They are, in essence, the lifeblood of live theater. One last thought, a little bit of theatrical trivia to lull you into a peaceful slumber. Almost there, I promise. Did you know that it's considered bad luck to whistle backstage? The superstition dates back to the days when theaters relied on sailors to operate the rigging. Sailors used whistles to communicate with each other, and a stray whistle backstage could be mistaken for a cue, leading to chaos and potentially dangerous accidents. So, next time you're backstage, keep those lips zipped. Seriously, I can already hear the ASMR whisperers latching onto this one. And with that, my friend, we've reached the end of our little theatrical exploration. I hope you found it informative, entertaining, and maybe just a little bit relaxing. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and dream of flying pigs in top hats. Good night. Okay, settle in, grab your favorite blanket, maybe a warm drink. Let's talk about rain. I know, sounds boring. But trust me, we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of how rain, that thing we usually complain about, became a laughing matter on stage. You trudge through your day, dodging puddles, maybe muttering something about needing an arc, and you probably don't think of it as comedic gold. But playwrights? Oh, they saw the potential. Think about it, rain is inherently disruptive. It messes with plans, ruins hairstyles, and generally throws a wrench into everyday life. And what's more fun than watching someone else's carefully constructed world get soaked? It's schadenfreude, baby, and theater loves it. You're probably picturing a Shakespearean tragedy right now, King Lear ranting on the heath, getting drenched, right? Well, while Shakespeare certainly used rain for dramatic effect, and trust me, we'll get to that, we're talking about something a little lighter, a little sillier. Something that makes you chuckle, not weep. So, how does a playwright turn something so damp into a joke? Well, there are a few classic techniques. First, there's the anticipation of rain. The gathering clouds, the ominous thunder, the frantic rush to get inside. It's all building tension, but the tension can be released with a well-timed slip on a wet cobblestone or a character's elaborate umbrella collapsing in a gust of wind. You see a character, let's call him Bartholomew. Bartholomew is meticulously dressed in his finest clothes, ready to impress a potential suitor. He checks the weather forecast, it's clear. Perfect. He steps outside, brimming with confidence, only to be immediately bombarded by a torrential downpour. His carefully styled hair is now plastered to his forehead, his pristine suit is clinging to him like a second skin, and his dignity gone. You can already hear the audience giggling, can't you? And then, of course, there's the exaggeration. Think of the cartoonish rainstorms of vaudeville, where buckets of water were literally dumped on actors. Or the use of increasingly absurd props to combat the deluge, comically oversized umbrellas, ridiculous raincoats that resemble inflatable animals. The sillier, the better. It is rumored, and I mean rumored, that some theaters even employed rain wranglers, whose sole job was to make the on-stage rain as chaotic and unpredictable as possible. I can neither confirm nor deny the existence of such a profession, but the thought is hilarious, isn't it? Imagine putting that on your resume. And it wasn't just about physical comedy. Rain also became a metaphor for other kinds of stuff falling on people. Bad luck, misfortune, just general existential dread. Playwrights would use rain to symbolize the overwhelming weight of the world, but then undercut it with a funny line or a ridiculous situation. It's like saying, yeah, life sucks, but hey, at least it's raining on everyone equally. Misery loves company, especially when it's raining. The use of stagecraft played a huge role in creating the illusion of rain, of course. Early theaters relied on relatively simple techniques, perforated watering cans, strategically placed hoses, even just rattling sheet metal to simulate thunder. As technology advanced, so did the rain effects. By the late 19th century, some theaters had elaborate hydraulic systems that could create realistic, controllable rainstorms on stage. Can you imagine being the stagehand whose sole responsibility was controlling the rain? Talk about job security. The show must go on, rain or shine, even if you are the rain. Now, mainstream historical fact for you, the development of effective indoor plumbing actually coincided with a rise in the popularity of rain scenes on stage. Think about it. As people became more accustomed to controlling water in their everyday lives, they also became more fascinated with seeing it controlled, or uncontrolled, in a theatrical setting. But it's not just about the spectacle. Rain, especially in comedy, is often used as a catalyst for character development. People are forced to take shelter together, awkward conversations are had, secrets are revealed. Think of the romantic comedy trope where two enemies are trapped in a phone booth during a downpour and forced to confront their feelings for each other. The rain isn't just background noise, it's an active participant in the story. Historians still argue whether the increased use of rain in comedies was a direct result of technological advancements or a reflection of changing social attitudes. Maybe it was a bit of both. Maybe people just really liked seeing other people get wet. Who knows? It's one of those great, unanswerable questions that keeps academics employed. Let's consider the context. In a time when indoor climate control was a luxury, rain was a much more pervasive force in people's lives. A sudden downpour could ruin an entire day, disrupt travel, and even threaten crops. So, seeing rain on stage, in a controlled and often humorous way, could be a form of catharsis. It was a way to laugh at something that was often a source of frustration and anxiety. And don't forget the sound. The pitter-patter on the roof, the whoosh of wind, the distant rumble of thunder, these are all powerful sensory cues that can evoke a range of emotions. A skilled sound designer can use these sounds to create a specific atmosphere, to amplify the humor of a scene, or even to foreshadow upcoming events. You hear that steady drip drip drip? Someone's about to get a bucket of water dumped on their head. Just kidding, mostly. Now, for a quirky tidbit, in some cultures, rain dances were not always solemn rituals. There are accounts of rain dances that were deliberately performed badly, with the intention of mocking the gods and provoking them into sending rain. It was a sort of reverse psychology approach to weather control, and apparently, it sometimes worked. Talk about a risky comedic gamble. And while we're on the topic of risk, let's just acknowledge the inherent dangers of using water on stage. Electrical hazards, slippery surfaces, potential for hypothermia. It's a wonder that anyone ever agreed to participate in a rain scene. But the allure of the comedic payoff was clearly too strong to resist. You see, ultimately, the humor of rain in plays comes from the contrast between our expectations and reality. We expect to be dry, comfortable, and in control of our surroundings. Rain disrupts those expectations. It reminds us that we are at the mercy of the elements, and that sometimes, the best thing we can do is just laugh about it. And let's face it, watching someone else deal with a downpour is always funnier than dealing with it yourself. So next time you're at the theater and the heavens open up on stage, remember all the history, the technique, and the sheer audacity that went into making that rain happen. Appreciate the wet, chaotic, and utterly ridiculous beauty of it all. Maybe even bring an umbrella, just in case. You never know when a rogue sprinkler system might decide to join the show. Don't say I didn't warn you. Alright, that's our exploration of the humorous side of rain in plays. Hope you found it enlightening, and not too dampening. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's talk rain. Yeah, that stuff that sometimes politely drizzles and sometimes decides to wage a personal war against your umbrella. We're not talking about pleasant rain, mind you, but the dramatic, scene-setting, mood-altering downpour that playwrights have wielded like a soggy weapon for, well, pretty much forever. You trudge down a dimly lit street, the collar of your coat pulled high, the relentless drumming of rain a constant companion. Each footstep sends a splash echoing in the near silence, broken only by the occasional passing car. The air smells damp, earthy, and vaguely melancholic. See? Already, you're practically in a play. Think about it. Rain is a shortcut. It's a visual cue that something significant is happening, or about to. It amplifies existing emotions. Happy. Rain cleanses and refreshes. Sad. It's nature weeping with you. Angry. It's the heavens roaring in agreement. Broke. It's just another reason you can't afford a decent umbrella. Playwrights know this. And they exploit it. Ruthlessly. Now, consider Shakespeare. The bard was no stranger to a good storm. He wasn't just throwing rain in there for atmosphere, it was practically a character in itself. Think of King Lear, staggering around on the blasted heath, howling at the storm. The rain mirrors Lear's inner turmoil, the chaos in the heavens reflecting the chaos in his mind. He's lost his kingdom, his daughters have betrayed him, and to top it all off, he's got the world's worst weather. It's peak dramatic irony, really. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare actually experienced weather this extreme during his lifetime, but there's no denying the effect it has on the play. Fun fact, during Shakespeare's time, stage rain was often created by shaking dried peas or beans in a tray. Imagine the poor stagehands, frantically rattling legumes to mimic a tempest. You've got to admire the ingenuity, even if it probably sounded more like a mildly agitated maraca than a torrential downpour. You squint, trying to see through the sheets of rain blurring the streetlights ahead. The reflection of neon signs shimmers on the wet pavement, painting the world in distorted colors. You can almost hear the distant wail of a saxophone, perfect noir atmosphere. Think about the psychological impact of rain. It forces us indoors, into enclosed spaces, heightening tension and claustrophobia. It isolates characters, cutting them off from the outside world and forcing them to confront each other, or themselves. You know, like when you're stuck in your house on a rainy day and you consider adopting a cat just so you have someone to talk to. And the sound. The steady drumming, the splashing, the rush of water down drains. It's a constant, almost hypnotic backdrop. It can be soothing, but it can also be incredibly unnerving, particularly if you're, say, hiding a body or waiting for a clandestine meeting. Consider Henrik Ibsen's Ghosts. The play deals with dark secrets, repressed desires, and the stifling atmosphere of a small Norwegian town. Rain is a constant presence, a symbol of the pervasive gloom and the unshakable weight of the past. It's like the whole play is perpetually damp with despair. By the way, did you know that Ibsen wrote Ghosts while living in Italy? Talk about writing what you don't know. He was craving the moody Norwegian atmosphere, so he just conjured it up, rain and all. He probably complained about the sunshine the whole time. You pull your coat tighter, a shiver running down your spine. Is it the rain, or something else? The air feels heavy, charged with unspoken emotions. You swear you can hear whispers on the wind. Think about film noir. So much of it takes place at night, in the rain. It just oozes atmosphere. The glistening streets, the shadows lengthening in the downpour, the femme fatale emerging from the darkness with a dripping umbrella, it's all iconic. Rain hides secrets, washes away evidence, or so they hope, and creates a sense of unease and foreboding. It's the perfect visual metaphor for the moral ambiguity and corruption that lie beneath the surface of the genre. Fun fact number 2, some early filmmakers actually used milk to create the effect of rain on screen. It looked great, but apparently smelled terrible after a while. Imagine the set, rain made of milk, a faint, sour odor hanging in the air. Talk about method acting. Historians still argue over whether film noir was a direct response to the social and political climate of post-war America, but the use of rain to amplify the themes of disillusionment and moral decay is undeniable. The rain isn't just there to get the actors wet, it's there to wash away any lingering hope. You stop beneath a flickering streetlight, the rain dripping from the brim of your hat. A puddle reflects your distorted image back at you, a ghostly figure caught in the downpour. It's almost a cliché, but still effective, isn't it? Now, let's not forget the comedic possibilities of rain. Picture this, a meticulously planned outdoor wedding, ruined by a sudden torrential downpour. The bride's elaborate hairstyle collapses, the carefully arranged flowers are flattened, and the guests huddle under inadequate umbrellas, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Chaos ensues. It's slapstick gold. Or, imagine two characters having a heated argument, only for a sudden rainstorm to force them to take shelter together, leading to an unexpected moment of vulnerability and connection. Rain can be a great equalizer, stripping away pretense and forcing people to confront each other on a more human level. Unless, of course, one character is wearing a ridiculously oversized rain hat. Then it's just hilarious. You step off the curb, carefully avoiding a particularly large puddle. The rain shows no signs of letting up. The city feels deserted, swallowed by the darkness and the relentless downpour. Think about the symbolism of rain. It can represent cleansing, renewal, and rebirth. But it can also represent sorrow, despair, and destruction. It depends on the context, the characters, and the overall tone of the play. But one thing is certain, rain is never just rain. It's always something more. It's always loaded. And one thing is certain, writing about rain makes me tired. Historians still debate the precise origins of the theatrical rain curtain, a technique used to create a realistic rain effect on stage, but it's a safe bet that some poor stagehand got very, very wet in the process of figuring it out. It's basically just a perforated pipe suspended above the stage, releasing water to create the illusion of rain. Simple, but effective. Unless, of course, something goes wrong and you end up with a stage full of bewildered actors and a small indoor flood. You continue walking, the rain now a constant, rhythmic drone. The world feels muted, softened, as if seen through a veil. Think about the absence of rain. Ironically, even the lack of rain can be a powerful dramatic device. A prolonged drought, for example, can create tension, desperation, and conflict. It can symbolize barrenness, infertility, and the loss of hope. Think of plays set in arid landscapes, where water is scarce and precious. The absence of rain becomes a metaphor for the absence of life itself. You reach your destination, a dimly lit doorway offering refuge from the storm. You shake off your coat, leaving a small puddle on the floor. The air inside is warm and dry, a welcome contrast to the wet chill outside. You take a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief. Rain, huh? It's more than just water falling from the sky. It's a tool, a symbol, a mood setter. Playwrights have used it for centuries to enhance their stories, to amplify emotions, and to create a world that feels both familiar and unsettling. Okay, maybe that was more like 950-ish words. Blame the rain, it made me lose count. I'm off to find some dry socks. Until next time, stay dry, or don't. It's your play. Good night. Okay, settle in, pull that blanket up, maybe grab a warm drink, decaf, of course, we don't need any extra energy right now, because we're about to dive deep into the soggy world of theater economics. Specifically, what happens when Mother Nature decides to throw a rain-soaked wrench into the carefully oiled machine of show business. You trudge through the city streets, the sky a dull gray, each step a resigned splash. You're headed to the theater, a beacon of light in the gloom, but you can already sense the tension hanging in the air, thicker than the humidity. The marquee still shines brightly, proclaiming tonight's performance, but the box office windows are eerily deserted. That's your first clue. See, the theater, for all its glamour and artistry, is a business. A business ridiculously vulnerable to the whims of the weather. It's not like a streaming service where people can just huddle up at home and binge-watch regardless of precipitation. You actually have to leave the house, battle the elements, and possibly sacrifice a dry pair of socks to get there. And let's be honest, when the rain is coming down in sheets, most people would rather be anywhere else. Hence, the empty box office. The immediate financial impact is, well, obvious. Cancelled shows mean zero ticket revenue. Shortened shows mean prorated ticket revenue, and a lot of disgruntled patrons demanding refunds. And refunds, my friends, are the bane of any theater manager's existence. Imagine the paperwork. The customer service calls. The existential dread. It's enough to make you want to join a monastery, or maybe just open a really good umbrella shop. Beyond the immediate ticket sales, there's a ripple effect. Think about the pre-theater dinner rush at the surrounding restaurants. Empty tables mean less profit for them, which means less tax revenue for the city, which means, well, you get the picture. It's a whole ecosystem, and the theater is a surprisingly vital part of it. Theaters are really part of the glue that holds up a lot of economies, especially those in the city. And speaking of ripple effects, consider the performers. Actors, musicians, stagehands, ushers, they all rely on those performances for their income. A cancelled show could mean a significant dent in their paychecks, especially for those just starting out or working on a per-performance basis. Remember that time you were counting on that overtime pay from that weekend to pay the rent? Imagine relying on that pay every week. The theater world is a harsh mistress. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so it rains, shows get cancelled, people lose money. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that these cancellations can add up. A few rainy days here and there might be manageable, but a prolonged period of inclement weather, like a hurricane or a series of relentless thunderstorms, can be devastating. It can literally bankrupt a smaller theater company. They don't have the resources of a big Broadway production. It's more about the love of the art, but love alone cannot pay the bills. Historically, theaters have always been at the mercy of the elements. Back in Shakespeare's day, performances at the Globe Theatre were held outdoors, rain or shine. Well, mostly shine. If it rained too heavily, the show would be called off, and the audience would have to find something else to do, probably involving copious amounts of ale. Historians still argue whether the thatched roof of the original Globe was actually as effective at keeping out the rain as legend suggests. Some say it leaked like a sieve, adding to the already miserable experience of attending a play in the downpour. Can you imagine sitting through Hamlet while simultaneously getting soaked to the bone? Talk about dramatic irony. And here's a fun fact, did you know that in some early theaters, they employed orange girls? These were young women who sold oranges and other refreshments during intermissions. Supposedly, they also served as, well, let's just say their services extended beyond selling citrus. It was all part of the vibrant, somewhat scandalous atmosphere of the theater back then. I mean, what is a night out without the possibility of a little intrigue? But let's get back to the financial implications of rain. One of the biggest challenges for theaters is predicting the weather accurately. Sure, we have sophisticated weather forecasting technology these days, but even the best meteorologists can't guarantee sunshine on a particular evening. And even if they do predict clear skies, there's always that lingering fear that a rogue thunderstorm will roll in at the last minute, scaring away potential ticket buyers. Theaters have tried various strategies to mitigate the financial impact of rain. Some offer rain checks, allowing patrons to exchange their tickets for a future performance. Others invest in elaborate indoor climate control systems to ensure that the show can go on, regardless of what's happening outside. And some, like the Public Theater in New York City, have even embraced the rain, staging outdoor performances in Central Park come rain or shine, and often offering ponchos to the audience. You pass the concession stand, the popcorn machine sits silent and forlorn. Even the smell of stale butter seems subdued, defeated by the pervasive dampness. You spot the theater manager pacing nervously in the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. There's also the insurance aspect to consider. Many theaters carry insurance policies that cover losses due to inclement weather, but these policies can be expensive, and they often come with strict limitations and deductibles. It's not a foolproof solution, but it can provide some financial relief in the event of a major weather-related disaster. It's essentially a gamble, and the house almost always wins. You know what is a gamble? When theaters offer discounts to patrons who brave the rain. It's a risky move, but it can sometimes be effective in filling seats and generating some revenue. It's basically saying, hey, we know it sucks out there, but come on in and enjoy the show. We'll even knock a few bucks off the price of admission. It's like retail therapy, but with more dramatic monologues. You see, the theater business is all about managing risk. From choosing the right plays to casting the right actors to marketing the performances effectively, every decision involves a certain degree of uncertainty. And the weather is just one more variable to add to the equation. It's a chaotic equation, though, because all it takes is the rumor of rain to keep people away. And sometimes, a cancelled show can actually have a positive impact, at least in the long run. It can generate buzz and create a sense of exclusivity, making people even more eager to see the next performance. It's like, oh, you missed the show last night? Well, you missed something truly special, and tragically cancelled due to rain. You could call it the scarcity effect. Basically, that makes something more desirable because it is rare. That can also be applied to limited edition snacks, and even Beanie Babies. Historians still argue whether the rise of cinema contributed to a decline in live theater attendance during periods of inclement weather. After all, why brave the elements to see a play when you could stay dry and comfortable in a movie theater? But theater has endured nonetheless, largely due to its unique ability to connect performers and audiences in a shared, live experience. You can't get that from a screen. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some cultures, rain is seen as a symbol of good luck and fertility. So, a rainy opening night might actually be considered a good omen, a sign that the show will be blessed with success. Whether theater managers actually believe in this superstition is another question. You finally make your way inside the theater, the air noticeably warmer and drier. The faint murmur of voices fills the lobby, a mix of disappointment and resignation. You overhear a conversation about the possibility of a shortened performance, a compromise that might appease both the audience and the performers. But the mood is subdued, the energy lacking. The rain, it seems, has dampened more than just the streets outside. A stage manager walks by you in his headset, and he sighs. He's had a very long day. Ultimately, the financial implications of rain on theater income are complex and multifaceted. There's no easy solution, no magic formula that can guarantee success in the face of inclement weather. It requires a combination of careful planning, creative thinking, and a healthy dose of optimism. And maybe a really good umbrella. You know, for good luck. And now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go curl up with a good book and listen to the sound of the rain. But hey, at least I'm not a theater manager right now. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's keep that outdoor movie dream alive, even if Mother Nature is trying to rain on our parade, literally. Because let's face it, hoping for perfect weather is like hoping your internet connection will stay stable during a crucial video call. It might happen, but are you willing to bet your entire evening on it? Didn't think so. So, what's the plan B? You guessed it, indoor theaters. Not as romantic, perhaps, as starlight and crickets, but infinitely more reliable. Think of it as the sensible shoes of film viewing. They might not be stilettos, but they'll get you where you need to go without twisting an ankle, or, in this case, getting drenched. I mean, have you ever tried to operate a projector with raindrops blurring the lens? It's about as effective as trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. Trust me, it's just a recipe for existential dread. Now, I know what you're thinking. Indoor theaters. That's boring. I could just stay home and watch Netflix. And you could. You really could. But where's the event in that? Where's the feeling of community, the shared experience of gasping, laughing, and maybe even tearing up? Don't be ashamed, we've all been there, in a darkened room with strangers. Plus, you don't have to share your popcorn with your cat, who always seems to think it deserves a taste, even though it has its own perfectly good bowl of kibble. Indoor theaters have a long and storied history, you know. Did you know that the first public movie theater, a Nickelodeon, opened in Pittsburgh in 1905? Can you imagine paying just 5 cents to see a movie? Those were the days, though probably not for the actors, who were likely paid even less. The Nickelodeon was a marvel of ingenuity, a dark box where flickering images came to life, captivating audiences with stories they had never seen before. It was, in a sense, the ancestor of the massive multiplexes we have today, just a bit more economical. It's amazing how far we've come, from a cramped room with uncomfortable benches to reclining seats with built-in cup holders. That's progress, baby. Of course, not all indoor theaters are created equal. You've got your historic grand theaters, with their ornate architecture and velvet curtains, whispering tales of bygone eras. Then you've got your modern multiplexes, gleaming with digital screens and surround sound, practically assaulting your senses with cinematic glory. And then there are the indie theaters, the quirky little gems that show independent films and host Q&As with the directors. They're like the little cafes of the film world, offering something a little more artisanal. It's like going to a music festival versus listening to the same 3 pop songs on the radio. Interestingly, there's a slightly fringe belief that some older theaters are haunted by the ghosts of former performers or patrons. Maybe it's just the creaky floorboards and the flickering lights playing tricks on our minds, but who's to say for sure? I mean, if you were a ghost, wouldn't you want to hang out in a place where you could watch movies all day? Makes perfect sense to me. Though, imagine the ghost trying to get through the digital projection booth security system. Talk about a plot for a movie. Selecting an indoor theater as a backup, therefore, is all about finding the right fit for your event. Consider the size of your audience. A small, intimate theater is perfect for a private screening or a special event. A larger theater is better for a bigger crowd, like a community film festival. Think about the atmosphere you want to create. Do you want something elegant and sophisticated, or something more casual and relaxed? I mean, if you're showing a horror movie, you probably don't want to hold it in a theater that's decorated with pastel colors and fluffy bunnies. Unless, of course, you're going for ironic horror, which is a whole other ballgame. Also, check the theater's technical capabilities. Does it have a high-quality projector and sound system? Can it accommodate your chosen film format? Is there sufficient lighting and ventilation? Because nothing ruins a movie faster than a blurry picture, tinny sound, or a room full of sweaty, uncomfortable people. It's like trying to enjoy a gourmet meal with a plastic fork while being serenaded by a kazoo band. Just, no. And, of course, there's the issue of cost. Renting an indoor theater can be expensive, so factor that into your budget. See if you can negotiate a lower rate, especially if you're booking during off-peak hours. You could also consider partnering with the theater to share the profits from ticket sales. After all, a successful event is a win-win for everyone involved. Historians still argue whether the decline of single-screen theaters in favor of multiplexes was a net positive for cinema. On one hand, multiplexes offered audiences a wider variety of films to choose from. On the other hand, they often lacked the charm and character of the older theaters. It's a trade-off, really, like choosing between quantity and quality, or between having a lot of friends versus having a few really close ones. Beyond the basic logistics, transforming an indoor theater into something special requires a bit of creativity. Think about decorations, lighting, and even themed concessions. For example, if you're showing a classic film noir, dim the lights, set up some faux crime scene tape, and serve martinis, non-alcoholic, of course, unless you have the proper permits. If you're showing a family-friendly movie, decorate with balloons, serve popcorn and candy, and maybe even hire a face painter. Just avoid the clowns. Trust me on this one. Clowns are never a good idea. Unless, again, you are trying to invoke a sense of ironic horror. One often overlooked advantage of indoor theaters is their accessibility. They're usually located in convenient locations, with ample parking and public transportation options. They're also more likely to be accessible to people with disabilities, with features like wheelchair ramps, accessible seating, and assistive listening devices. Which is important, because everyone deserves the chance to enjoy a good movie, regardless of their physical abilities. It's a reminder that the best experiences are the ones that are inclusive and welcoming to all. And hey, speaking of inclusivity, remember that the movie you choose is key. If it's a special event, what about letting the audience vote on the film beforehand? This ensures that everyone is excited about the movie and feels like they have a say in the experience. It also avoids the awkward silence when you announce the film and half the audience looks like they just swallowed a lemon. Nobody wants that. Now, back to ambience. You can enhance your indoor theater experience with pre-show entertainment. Consider hiring a musician or a band to perform before the movie starts. Or, if you're feeling ambitious, you could even put on a short play or a skit that's related to the film. Just make sure it's entertaining and doesn't drag on too long. Nobody wants to sit through a 3-hour performance before a 2-hour movie. That's like having to listen to your grandpa's entire life story before he finally gets to the punchline of his joke. I am almost done. I promise. Just think of this as a movie that's in the final act, where everything is starting to come together. Ultimately, while the allure of an outdoor movie night under the stars is undeniable, embracing the practicality of an indoor theater as a backup plan is not a sign of defeat. Instead, it's a mark of preparedness, resilience, and a dedication to providing your audience with a memorable experience, rain or shine, or rogue squirrels interrupting the projection. Remember, it's about the shared joy of watching a movie together, not about the specific location. And who knows? Maybe your indoor movie night will be even more memorable than you imagined. Okay, settle in, make yourself comfy. Maybe grab a blanket, because we're diving deep into the theatrical world and, wouldn't you know it, rain. Specifically, rain as an omen. Think of it as theater-themed ASMR, sprinkled with a touch of, well, me. You trudge through the backstage area. It smells faintly of dust, old costumes, and the lingering ghost of hairspray. The stage manager's giving you that look, you know, the one that says, if you're not useful, get out. But you're here for the drama, the real drama, the kind soaked in superstition. Rain on opening night. Ugh. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, some believe it's a blessing, a cleansing of the stage, washing away the bad vibes and ushering in good fortune. A fresh start, literally. Like, look, Mother Nature's giving us a standing ovation, of precipitation. Except, probably louder. Others? They're frantically crossing their fingers and praying for a break in the clouds. Rain, historically, has always been a pretty big deal. I mean, before modern irrigation, a good downpour was the difference between feasting and famine. It was life. It was death. It's no wonder that cultures worldwide developed complex beliefs surrounding it. And these beliefs tend to seep into just about everything, theater included. Think about the Globe Theatre. Shakespeare, the bard himself. Do you know how many times it rained during a performance there? A lot. It was an open-air theater, after all. And imagine trying to deliver Hamlet's soliloquy while getting drenched. To be or not to be, asterisk achoo, asterisk, that is the question. But, did they see it as a bad omen? Historians still argue whether audiences were more concerned about getting soaked than about the potential implications of the weather. Some believe that a bit of rain was just part of the experience, something to be endured. Others think certain types of rain, a light drizzle versus a torrential downpour, for example, might have held different meanings. A light drizzle, maybe a gentle reminder to keep your nose clean. A downpour? Perhaps a warning from the gods themselves. Like, seriously, this play is awful. We're trying to tell you something. Speaking of bad omens, you know that whole Macbeth curse thing, right? Never, ever, say the name Macbeth in a theater unless you're actually rehearsing or performing it. Or, you're deliberately trying to stir up trouble. Legend has it that the play is cursed, and uttering its name will bring about all sorts of theatrical disasters. Rain, of course, being one of the tamer possibilities. We're talking fallen sets, broken limbs, and existential crises. One particularly quirky belief surrounding the Macbeth curse is that it stemmed from the play's inclusion of real witchcraft spells. Supposedly, the witches who were depicted in the play were none too pleased with their secrets being revealed on stage. Now, I'm not saying that Shakespeare was hanging out with actual witches, but it definitely adds a certain spice to the legend. And if they were truly that upset, well, summoning a little rain seems pretty tame compared to, turning someone into a newt. You sneak a peek at the director. They're pacing back and forth, muttering something about atmospheric conditions, and the dramatic effect of unexpected precipitation. Oh, honey. I bet they didn't account for this in their vision board. You see, the interesting thing about these superstitions is how specific they can get. It's not just rain in general. The timing matters. Rain before opening night might be seen as good luck, clearing the way for success. Rain on opening night? A test of endurance, a challenge to be overcome. Rain during the final performance? Maybe a sign of closure, a gentle farewell. Like, okay, show's over, folks. Go home. And then there's the intensity of the rain. A soft, gentle rain might be interpreted as a blessing, a sign of approval. A thunderstorm? Well, that's a whole different ballgame. That's the theatrical gods throwing a tantrum, probably because someone forgot to properly thank the ghost light. Ah, the ghost light. Another theatrical superstition. A single bare bulb left burning on stage when the theater is otherwise dark. It serves several purposes. It keeps anyone from tripping and breaking their neck in the dark, practical, it wards off mischievous spirits, essential, and, according to some, it provides a light for the theater's resident ghosts to perform on stage when no one else is around, charming. Some people believe that if the ghost light flickers or goes out unexpectedly, it's a sign of impending doom. And, naturally, rain could be interpreted as the catalyst for such an event. Maybe a power outage caused by a particularly dramatic lightning strike. You watch as a stagehand frantically tries to mop up a puddle near the wings. It seems the roof isn't as watertight as everyone thought. This is just adding fuel to the superstitious fire. Each drop of water is now imbued with extra significance, each thunderclap a potential harbinger of disaster. Historically, indoor theaters weren't exactly known for their impeccable roofing. Remember the Rose Theatre, another of London's Elizabethan playhouses? It was uncovered during excavations in 1989, and archaeologists found evidence of multiple renovations and repairs, likely due to the weather. Imagine trying to maintain focus during a passionate monologue with water dripping on your head. Talk about method acting. It's important to remember that superstitions are, well, superstitions. They're based on belief, not necessarily on logic. But in the high-stakes world of theater, where so much is left to chance, it's understandable that people cling to anything that might give them a sense of control. Or at least a sense of understanding. Like, okay, the show's a disaster, but at least we know why, it's because I wore the wrong socks. Of course, there's always the practical side of things. Rain can wreak havoc on costumes, sets, and equipment. It can delay performances, reduce ticket sales, and generally make everyone miserable. But even the most pragmatic stage manager can't help but feel a twinge of unease when the sky turns a particularly ominous shade of gray. Historians still argue whether these theatrical superstitions are remnants of older, more widespread beliefs, or if they developed independently within the theater community. It's probably a bit of both. After all, theater has always been a reflection of society, and society has always been fascinated by the unknown. You yawn. This whole thing is making you sleepy. The gentle patter of the rain outside is strangely soothing. Maybe it is a good omen after all. A sign that everything will be okay. Or maybe it's just rain. One of the more amusing fringe tidbits is the belief that whistling backstage is bad luck. Supposedly, it used to be a signal used by stagehands to communicate when scenery was being lowered. Whistling at the wrong time could lead to someone getting beamed by a rogue sandbag. So, whistling backstage is akin to tempting fate, almost as bad as saying the Scottish play. Unless you have a death wish, refrain from whistling. Even humming, for safety. Just remember, though, no matter what happens, the show must go on. Even if it's raining cats and dogs. And if it is, maybe invest in some good quality umbrellas. And a really convincing raincoat for Hamlet. Because, honestly, a soggy Dane isn't going to deliver the pathos quite as effectively. Okay, that was, oddly calming, right? Maybe I should start a weather-themed ASMR channel. Gentle thunder sounds for actors with stage fright. It's got a ring to it. Alright, hey there, settle in, settle in. Let's just take a little stroll back in time, shall we? Back to Elizabethan England. Now, you're not exactly hopping into a time machine, more like, gently, floating, into a historical diorama. And, spoiler alert, it's going to be a little less convenient than your modern life. You trudge along a muddy track, the kind that passes for a road in the late 16th century. It's churned up by the hooves of horses and the wheels of carts, a brown, gloopy mess that sucks at your boots with every step. The air, thick and damp, hangs heavy with the smells of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly a priority. Think of it as a vintage eau de toilette, with a heavy musk of, manure. You're pretty sure your noise-canceling headphones wouldn't stand a chance against this potent blend. And speaking of noise, forget about your curated Spotify playlist. Your soundtrack is the bleating of sheep, the squawking of chickens, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the incessant drone of, well, everything. Everything's just a little bit louder and a little bit organic here. You can't just pop in your earbuds and escape. You're immersed. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so it's a little smelly and noisy. Big deal. But remember, this is a world utterly devoid of the technological comforts you take for granted. Forget your smartphone. Forget your car. Forget indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and reliable electricity. Historians still argue whether the lack of these things actually made people more resilient, or just, more miserable. Either way, you're definitely going to be building up some character points. Imagine trying to navigate this world without Google Maps. If you're lucky, you might stumble across a hand-drawn map, probably wildly inaccurate and missing key landmarks. More likely, you're relying on directions passed down through generations, often cryptic and contradictory. Turn left at the Crooked Oak, then follow the river until you see the Three Sisters, which sounds lovely. Unless the oak fell down, the river changed course, and the Three Sisters moved to London 20 years ago. Communication is another adventure. No texting, no email, no instant messaging. If you want to send a message, you need a messenger on horseback. And that messenger needs to contend with bandits, bad weather, and the general unreliability of horses. It could take days, even weeks, for your message to reach its destination. By which time, whatever you were trying to communicate might be completely irrelevant. Did you know that Queen Elizabeth I famously received news of the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, days after it happened? Imagine the group chat after that. And what about information? Forget Wikipedia. Forget Google Scholar. Knowledge is power, and in Elizabethan England, power is very carefully controlled. The printing press, while revolutionary, is still relatively new and subject to strict censorship. Information spreads slowly, often filtered through rumor and hearsay. Getting accurate information is about as easy as finding a reliable Wi-Fi signal in, well, anywhere in the countryside, really. The lack of medical technology is, a little daunting. A simple infection that you'd treat with a course of antibiotics today could be a death sentence. Surgery is performed without anesthesia, often by barbers who are just as likely to kill you as cure you. Did you know that Queen Elizabeth herself suffered from terrible toothaches, but refused to have her teeth pulled because she was afraid of the pain? She even had a court dentist perform the procedure in front of her, just to prove it wasn't so bad. Spoiler alert, it was probably really, really bad. Historians still debate whether the prevalence of disease shaped the worldview of the Elizabethans, making them more accepting of death and suffering. Or maybe they were just good at coping. And let's not forget the creative solutions people came up with to everyday problems. Because, let's face it, when you don't have access to modern technology, you get inventive. Need to keep food cold? You dig a hole in the ground and store it there. Need to tell time? You rely on the sun, or a sundial, which is about as useful as a chocolate teapot on a cloudy day. Need to relieve yourself? Well, let's just say that public sanitation wasn't exactly a thriving industry. Think chamber pots and communal outhouses. I'll spare you the sensory details. But there were, of course, some charming aspects to this technological deficit. Without the constant distractions of screens and notifications, people were forced to be more present in their lives. They spent more time outdoors, they engaged in conversation, they relied on their own skills and resourcefulness. Imagine, for a moment, having to entertain yourself without Netflix. You might actually learn to play the lute, or write poetry, or, talk to your family. And speaking of entertainment, it wasn't all doom and gloom. The Elizabethan era was a golden age for theatre, literature, and music. Shakespeare was writing his plays, Marlowe was penning his poetry, and England was buzzing with creativity. The Globe Theatre, with its open-air stage and rowdy audiences, was a hub of social life. You could catch a play for a penny, and even if you couldn't afford a seat, you could stand in the yard and heckle the actors. Think of it as live tweeting, but with, rotten vegetables. However, even the glories of the theatre weren't always hygienic. The Globe was known for its less-than-pleasant aromas, a potent mix of sweat, dirt, and, well, you can imagine. And the performances weren't exactly politically correct by today's standards. But hey, at least it was entertaining. Historians still debate whether the popularity of the theatre reflected a genuine love of art, or simply a lack of other options for entertainment. Or maybe it was both. And don't even get me started on personal hygiene. Bathing was a rare and often dreaded event. People believed that bathing too often could weaken your immune system and make you more susceptible to disease. So, they tended to avoid it. Instead, they relied on perfumes and pomanders to mask the smells. Think of it as the 16th century equivalent of Febreze. The lack of reliable lighting also shaped daily life. Once the sun went down, the world plunged into darkness. Candles were expensive and smoky, so most people went to bed early. Imagine trying to read a book by candlelight. It would be like trying to read your phone screen in direct sunlight. You might just give up and, sleep. Which, honestly, sounds pretty good right now. And as for food, well, let's just say it wasn't always gourmet. The diet of the average Elizabethan was heavily reliant on bread, cheese, and whatever vegetables they could grow in their gardens. Meat was a luxury, reserved for special occasions. And spices, which were essential for masking the taste of slightly off food, were incredibly expensive. Did you know that cloves were so valuable that they were sometimes used as currency? Now that's a spicy exchange rate. So, yeah, life in Elizabethan England was different. It was a world without the conveniences we take for granted, a world where survival was a daily struggle. But it was also a world of incredible creativity, resilience, and community. And while you might miss your smartphone and your Netflix account, you might also find something unexpectedly appealing about its simplicity and its connection to nature. Historians still argue whether the Elizabethan era was truly a golden age, or simply a time of gilded poverty and hardship. But one thing is for sure, it was a time that shaped the world we live in today. But for now, let's just say goodnight. Sweet dreams, and try not to think about chamber pots. Alright, settle in, friend. Pull up a comfy chair, maybe grab a cup of chamomile tea, or something a little stronger, no judgment here. Today, we're diving deep, real deep, into something that's probably dripped on you at some point, especially if you've ever been to an outdoor wedding, rain. Yes, that wet stuff falling from the sky. But not just rain as a dramatic device, a mood setter, a freakin' star of the show in the grand old theater of, well, everything. Think about it. Rain isn't just H2O, is it? Nah. It's atmosphere. It's drama. It's that one friend who always shows up late and ruins the picnic, but somehow, you're still glad they're there. Imagine singing in the rain without, the rain. It's just a guy tap dancing. Still impressive, sure, Gene Kelly was a legend, but it lacks that certain je ne sais quoi, that splash of, well, aqueous theatricality. It's the wet blanket that makes everything better, ironically. You trudge down a cobblestone street, the kind they always seem to have in old movies. The streetlights are blurry halos in the mist. The air hangs heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and, is that petrichor? Fancy. You pull your collar up, wishing you'd worn a hat. This is the kind of rain that soaks you to the bone, the kind that makes you question all your life choices. The kind that screams melodrama, in a way a single spotlight just can't. You can almost hear the mournful violin swelling in the background. Someone is definitely about to confess a secret, have a dramatic fight, or maybe just slip on a banana peel. It all feels equally possible in this cinematic downpour. Note to self, invest in banana peel futures. Rain in theater, in film, in life, it's always been a signaler. Back in Shakespeare's day, they didn't have fancy weather machines. They had words. The bard could conjure a tempest with just a few well-placed lines. Blow, winds, and crack your cheeks, he'd bellow, and suddenly, you're shivering in your Elizabethan doublet, even if it's a perfectly sunny afternoon at the Globe. Shakespeare was the original weather influencer. He could manipulate the audience's emotions with meteorological descriptions alone. Now, Shakespeare also allegedly used bearbaiting to draw crowds. So, mixed bag. Genius, but also, questionable HR practices. Historians still argue whether he actually wrote everything he's credited with. The conspiracy theories are wild. Maybe a collective of playwrights? Maybe aliens? The world may never know. But hey, you know what's not a theory? The sheer grit needed when rain is a real issue. Fast forward a few centuries, you're backstage at an outdoor production of, say, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Except, it's less dreamy and more drenched. The actors are battling not just fairies and love potions, but also actual puddles forming on the stage. Their costumes are clinging uncomfortably, their meticulously applied makeup is running down their faces like a sad clown's tears, and the audience is huddled under a sea of umbrellas, looking increasingly like a damp, disgruntled garden gnome convention. This wasn't in the program. The stage manager is frantically wiping down the microphones, praying they don't short-circuit and electrocute Puck. It's chaos. Glorious, waterlogged chaos. And yet, somehow, the show goes on. Why? Because that's what theater people do. They're like cockroaches, but with more glitter and significantly better dramatic monologues. They persevere. They adapt. They find a way to make the rain part of the story. Maybe Titania's tears are extra believable now, or maybe Bottom's ass ears are just, drooping slightly more than usual. Either way, rain unexpectedly amps up the stakes. Imagine King Lear without the storm. It's just an old guy yelling at his daughters. The tempest is crucial to the play's emotional core. It mirrors Lear's inner turmoil, his descent into madness. It's a visual and auditory representation of the chaos consuming him. The storm isn't just a backdrop, it's an active participant in his psychological breakdown. It's like the world itself is screaming along with him. There's also the rather macabre theory that Edgar Allan Poe would always use the rain and winds when he was ready to write. It created a perfect setting for the ominous tones in his writing. And who knows, he may have written The Raven during a storm. On a completely unrelated note, did you know there's a town in Chile, the Atacama Desert, where it literally never rains? I mean, talk about a dry run for an outdoor performance. Although, I guess you wouldn't get that authentic singing in the desert feel. But, let's be honest. Dealing with rain during a live performance is the stuff of nightmares for directors. You need special effects, yes, but those effects need to not drown your actors or turn the stage into a slip-and slide of doom. Then there's the sound. How do you make the rain loud enough to be dramatic, but not so loud that it drowns out the actors' voices? It's a delicate balancing act, a constant battle against the elements. Still, when it all comes together, when the rain is perfectly timed, when it enhances the drama instead of hindering it, it's pure magic. It's a moment that sticks with you, a sensory experience that elevates the performance to another level. Think of the rain scene in Blade Runner. That constant downpour creates a world that is both futuristic and gritty, a world that feels both alien and disturbingly familiar. Or consider the rain-soaked climax of say 7N. The rain isn't just weather, it's a symbol of the moral decay and corruption that pervades the entire film. Here's a fun fact. The first recorded use of artificial rain in theater dates back to the 17th century. They used a contraption that involved a perforated trough filled with water, which was then tipped over the stage. Ingenious, right? Also, incredibly messy. I can only imagine the cleanup. It was probably someone's unfortunate job to mop it all up. Now, you know what's kind of funny? We spend all this time and money trying to recreate rain on stage, when sometimes, the real thing just shows up uninvited. It's like nature is saying, oh, you think you can do rain? Hold my beer, air, cloud. It adds an element of unpredictability, a sense of danger. Scholars still debate about how much control theater directors should have over the weather's influence, and how much of it should be left up to chance. Is it better to meticulously plan every raindrop, or to embrace the chaos and let the elements do their thing? There is no right answer, it's an aesthetic choice, a philosophical debate about the nature of art and control. But hey, even if the rain ruins the show, you have a good story to tell. You can tell people about the time the lead actor slipped on stage and landed in the orchestra pit, or the time the entire set collapsed under the weight of the water. These are the moments that become legends, the stories that are passed down from one generation of theater nerds to the next. Rain in live performance is the great leveler, the ultimate improviser, the unexpected plot twist in the grand theatrical narrative. It might be annoying, inconvenient, and potentially disastrous, but it's also undeniably dramatic. So, the next time you're caught in a downpour, whether you're on stage or just trying to get to your car, take a moment to appreciate the rain. Appreciate its power, its beauty, its ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Because in the end, rain is more than just water. It's history, it's art, it's a reminder that even the most carefully planned productions can be swept away by something bigger than themselves. And that, my friend, is a story worth telling. And, well, in our case, listening to. What do you think? Shall we call it a night? Okay, settle in, friend. Let's bring this whole downpour to a peaceful end, shall we? We've splashed through centuries of stagecraft, and now, like stepping from a hot bath into a cool room, we arrive at the modern era. A final shower, if you will, of theatrical rain. You trudge into a contemporary theater. Perhaps the floor is polished concrete, the seating minimalist and sleek. But even here, in this temple of modern art, the echoes of rain resonate. It might not be a literal downpour on stage. Health and safety, darling, those things exist. But the idea of rain, the feeling of rain, that's still very much alive. Think about it, rain as metaphor. It's cleansing, isn't it? A way to wash away the grime, the guilt, the general existential dread that seems to permeate modern life. Plays exploring themes of redemption often use rain imagery, even subtly. A character might stand beneath a leaky awning, contemplating their past. A single spotlight, broken through stage fog, could mimic the slant of rain. You get the idea. And then there's the sound. Ah, the sound. Forget those clanky thunder sheets of yesteryear. Modern sound design is an art form in itself. You can now experience rain in so many intricate ways, from the delicate patter of a spring shower to the ominous roar of a monsoon, all crafted digitally. That level of control is why some consider sound designers to be the new wizards of the theater. You know, they're the ones making it rain indoors. Literally and figuratively. Of course, actors still have to provide the figurative part. It is truly fascinating to see how ancient traditions have been reimagined and reinvented for the stage. Now, you might find yourself wondering, did the ancient Greeks, in their pursuit of the dramatic, ever consider using actual rain on stage? Probably not, right? I mean, imagine the sanitation bill. Plus, if Zeus got a little overzealous, it might flood the whole theater. Let's not forget about the influence of realism that took hold in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Playwrights like Ibsen and Chekhov sought to portray life as it truly was, and for them, that meant including the weather. Realism, though, had its own quirks. For example, some theaters went to extreme lengths to create authentic rain, even building elaborate water tanks backstage. But even that level of commitment pales in comparison to what happens behind the scenes of certain Bollywood productions. Ever seen a Bollywood movie that spared any expense? Yeah, me neither. Here's a question for you, can rain, as a theatrical device, ever be too much? Can it become cliché? Historians still argue whether certain recurring motifs, like rain, are simply timeless archetypes or just lazy shortcuts for playwrights. I guess it depends on who you ask. I'm pretty sure my old theater professor would call it lazy any day. Let's move to another interesting tidbit, the way rain affects lighting designs. Have you ever thought about how rain interacts with light on stage? The way light can refract through raindrops, create shimmering patterns, and highlight the emotion in a character's face. One famous example is the use of rain in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. The rain that falls during Willy Loman's final moments represents his despair, his sense of being overwhelmed. It's not just about getting wet, you see. It's about being emotionally drenched. The reign of modern theater is no longer a novelty. It is a carefully curated experience to evoke specific emotions within the audience. We're just about wrapping up. However, before we go, let's pause and consider where it all began. The ancient Greeks and their theatrical traditions. The Greeks understood the power of storytelling and its ability to transport an audience. I wonder if they knew that their dramas would continue to inspire playwrights for centuries to come. It's easy to imagine them, gathered around a roaring fire, swapping stories, completely unaware that they were laying the foundations for Western theater. Now, that's a sobering thought. Consider, for example, the fringe idea that some ancient plays were performed during actual rainstorms, with the weather becoming an integral part of the performance. Imagine how different the Bacchae would be with actual rain. Now, that's an idea worth exploring. But enough of that. Time for a wind down. Okay, my friend, let the theatrical rain slowly fade now. Let the sounds of modern sound design give way to the gentle susurrus of a summer shower. Picture yourself nestled in a comfortable chair, a warm cup in your hand, as the rain falls softly outside. The streetlights cast a hazy glow through the raindrops, creating a peaceful, dreamy atmosphere. The world outside is quiet, still, almost holding its breath. Think of the actors on stage, their faces illuminated by the stage lighting as the artificial rain streams down around them. Their emotions are raw, vulnerable, laid bare for all to see. But now, let those images dissolve, soften around the edges. Remember the stories we've shared, the history we've explored, the theatrical traditions that have shaped the way we experience rain on stage today. Let those thoughts drift away, like raindrops on a windowpane. There's no need to hold on to them tightly. Just let them go. And as you drift off to sleep, may your dreams be filled with the gentle, soothing sound of rain. May your mind be calm, peaceful, and free from worry. Sweet dreams.